Have you ever heard a song echo through the woods and realized it was your own? That's how Daniel Mercer's story begins. Not with thunder or gunfire, but with a hymn, low, trembling, and answered. Daniel lived alone on the edge of the Monongahela Forest in West Virginia. His cabin leaned against the hillside like it had grown tired of standing straight. The paint peeled years ago, the porch sagged, and the wind carried the scent of cedar and rain through gaps in the window frames. He didn't mind. Out here, loneliness wasn't a curse, it was a routine. Each morning, he woke at 5, made coffee black as tar, and biked 12 miles down to the woodworking shop in Elkins. He repaired tables for folks who still believed solid oak meant something, sanded the edges of forgotten cradles, built frames for families he'd never meet. He never talked much, the kind of man who kept words the way others kept photographs, locked away in drawers. But that morning in late October, the fog came down thicker than he'd ever seen. It rolled like milk through the valley, erasing fences, trees, even the sound of the road. Daniel pedaled slow, his breath frosting in the cold, until a wooden post caught his eye, stapled with a fresh sheet of paper. $200 reward for proof of the Ridgeback thing. Someone had drawn a crude sketch. Tall, hulking, shaggy, with eyes like amber. Below, it said, "No questions asked." He almost laughed. Every mountain town had its monsters. The White Thing, the Mothman, coal spirits with human faces. Daniel had stopped believing in stories when he buried his son's photograph 12 years ago. But that night, while riding home through the same fog, he hummed without thinking. A tune his mother used to sing. "Abide with me," soft and slow. It filled the empty road, echoing against the black trees. And then, from somewhere beyond the mist, the melody came back. Perfect pitch. Same rhythm. A deeper voice, not mocking, mirroring. Daniel stopped pedaling. Hello. Silence. Then leaves shifted. Something moved just beyond the beam of his headlamp. He didn't see it, but he felt it, a weight in the dark, watching him, breathing in time with his own. He turned, but the forest only whispered back. By the time he reached his cabin, the fog had thinned. But the sound, that deep, steady voice repeating his song, still pressed against his chest like a heartbeat. The next morning, Daniel tried to laugh it off. Fog played tricks. The forest had its echoes, same as the mountains. But when he stepped out onto his porch, he saw them. Tracks. They weren't bare prints, and too large for a man's. Each one sank deep into the soft ground, 5 toes spread wide, heel heavy. The earth steamed slightly where the footprints lay, like the soil itself remembered warmth. He crouched and touched the edge of one. Damp. Fresh. He glanced toward the ridge behind his cabin, where the trees tangled into a shadowed wall. A chill ran through him. Not fear exactly, but recognition. Like finding handwriting you hadn't seen since childhood. That day at work, he couldn't focus. His coworker, Jim Weller, noticed. "You look like hell, Dan. You see the poster about the Ridgeback thing?" Daniel forced a half smile. "Maybe it saw me." Jim laughed, not noticing the tremor in Daniel's voice. When the shift ended, Daniel didn't take the road home. He took the old trail instead, the one his boy used to wander before he disappeared. The air smelled of pine sap and iron, the same smell that haunted Daniel's dreams. As dusk fell, he found something strange at the bend of the creek. A stack of river stones balanced in a spiral, each smaller than the last, forming a tower no wind could have built. He crouched, humming again without meaning to. "Abide with me." The last note hadn't left his lips before another voice answered. Deeper. Sadder. River. Daniel froze. The word was clear, shaped by a mouth that wasn't supposed to speak. He raised his flashlight and saw 2 amber eyes glimmering between the birches. Daniel's instincts screamed at him to run, but something older, heavier, curiosity maybe, kept him still. "River," he whispered back. The eyes blinked once, twice. Then a figure stepped into the weak light. It was enormous. At least 7 feet tall, shoulders wide as a doorframe. Dark hair matted against skin the color of clay. Its face was an animal, but not entirely human either. Features shaped by sorrow, not rage. For a long moment, neither moved. Daniel felt the air thicken between them, carrying a strange familiarity he couldn't explain. Then the creature tilted its head, sniffed, and said, almost gently, "Stay." Daniel's heart stopped. That word. The same word his son used to whisper to their dog when it ran too far. The same word Daniel had muttered years ago outside a research lab fence when the cage rattled and something inside had cried. He dropped his flashlight. No, no, it can't be. But the creature didn't advance. It only stared, waiting, breathing steady, eyes soft like it remembered him. Daniel stepped forward once. Do you know me? The creature's chest rose. Song, it said, placing a clawed hand over its heart. You sang. The forest seemed to fold in around them. For the first time in years, Daniel's eyes burned, not from fear, but memory. Before he could speak again, a branch snapped behind him. The creature flinched and vanished into the dark, silent as fog dispersing at dawn. Daniel called out. No answer. Only his own echo whispering through the trees. Stay, stay. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The wind pressed against the cabin walls like waves against a boat. He sat by the fire, staring at his hands, at the faint scars from old tools, the nicks from years of carving, the tremor that never quite stopped. He thought about the lab, the one hidden past the old mining road where he'd once done odd jobs for cash. They said it was a wildlife rehabilitation site. But what kind of wildlife learned to speak? What kind needed iron cages and armed guards? He remembered the smoke, the fire alarm, the panic. He'd run when the forest burned, heard something calling from inside the flames, a voice that wasn't human but cried like a child. He'd fled that night and never gone back. Until now. At dawn, he woke to the sound of knocking. Not at his door, on the side of the cabin. 3 heavy thuds. Then quiet. He stepped outside, heart racing. The fog had returned, thick and white. At his feet lay a branch, carved crudely into a shape, a flute. Rough, uneven, but unmistakably handmade. He picked it up, and as he did, a faint hum rose from the tree-line. That same tune, his tune, carried through the mist. Abide with me. Daniel looked toward the ridge and whispered, I'm still here. And somewhere in the distance, the deep voice replied, Stay. Have you ever held something in your hands and felt like it remembered you? That's how Daniel felt the next morning, staring at the flute lying on his kitchen table. It was rough but deliberate, made from river cane, the joints sealed with resin and ash. Whoever made it understood the way air moved through hollow space. Daniel ran a thumb along its edges. He felt small ridges, like fingerprints pressed into sap before it dried. He tried a note. The sound cracked, breathy, uncertain. But then, faintly from the forest, came a reply, the same tone, deeper and more resonant. Daniel stood there for a long time, flute trembling in his hands. Then he packed a thermos of tea, a flashlight, and his old hunting knife, and stepped into the woods. The trail beyond his cabin had long gone wild, thick with ferns and fallen logs. He followed the river until the sound of rushing water drowned the world. That's where he saw it again, the figure standing knee-deep in the current, sun glinting off wet fur like bronze. River, Daniel whispered, more to himself than to the creature. It turned, those amber eyes finding him easily through the mist. The creature didn't run this time. It stood tall, cautious but calm. Daniel lifted the flute, played a slow, broken tune. The creature listened, then stepped closer, ripples spreading around its legs. When it spoke, the word was clearer than before. You play? Daniel nodded. And you listen? The creature tilted its head. You sang. Fire. Long ago. Something inside Daniel cracked open. You remember that? It nodded once, then pointed to itself. Thorn. The name hung in the air like a prayer. Daniel almost said, I'm sorry, but the word stuck. Instead, he did the only thing that made sense. He poured tea into the cap of his thermos, set it on a rock between them, and said, for peace. Thorn sniffed it, curious, then crouched. Warm, he murmured, sipping carefully. Good. Daniel sat too, the river whispering between them. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. They met again 2 days later, then again the next week. Always by the river, always with the same quiet ritual, a cup of tea, a few words, a shared melody. Daniel learned to stop asking where Thorn came from. Instead, he listened. The creature's speech was halting but thoughtful, shaped by memory more than grammar. He spoke of cages, of light that burned without warmth, of men in white coats calling him Subject 13. Daniel knew that place. He'd been there, not as a scientist, but as the man who swept the floors, fixed the locks, and hummed songs to drown out the cries at night. He was younger then, desperate for money after Matthew's disappearance. "I didn't know what they were doing," Daniel said once, voice cracking. "I thought it was animal research." Thorne's gaze softened. "You sang," he said again. Others shouted. "You stayed." Daniel swallowed. "Not long enough." The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was heavy, full of things both understood and unspoken. One afternoon, rain pinned them beneath a rock ledge. Daniel watched droplets slide down Thorne's fur, catching hints of silver beneath the brown. The creature's chest rose and fell with a deep rhythm, almost like music. "Why did you come back?" Thorne asked suddenly. Daniel hesitated. "Because something in me never left." The creature nodded slowly. "The forest remembers you. Pain, song, loss." Daniel stared into the rain. "Yeah," he whispered. "It remembers too much." When the storm passed, they walked back together toward the cabin. It was the first time Daniel realized that Thorne moved carefully, never stepping on flowers, avoiding small nests in the moss. A giant with the grace of someone who'd learned the cost of destruction. That evening, Thorne followed Daniel inside. The cabin creaked under his weight, but he moved gently, ducking beneath the beams. Daniel poured 2 cups of tea and set one on the table. Thorne sniffed the steam and murmured, "Home." The word hit Daniel harder than he expected. "This place?" he asked. Thorne nodded. "Warm. Quiet. Feels like before." Before what? Daniel wanted to ask, but Thorne was already studying the carvings on the shelf, a row of wooden figures Daniel had made over the years. Birds, deer, a small boy holding a stick. His son's face frozen in cedar. Thorne touched it lightly, claws tracing the shape of the boy's cheek. "This one gone." Daniel's throat tightened. "Matthew, my boy." Thorne turned toward him, nostrils flaring. "Grief stays," he said softly. "Smells like rain." Daniel tried to smile, failed. "You can smell that." Thorne nodded. "Breath carries truth." They sat for hours as night swallowed the valley. Daniel told him about the boy who ran away at 11 after a fight, about the years of searching, the endless guilt. Thorne listened, silent, eyes half closed. Then he reached into the pouch made from bark at his side and pulled out a small piece of metal, a belt buckle, worn but engraved with initials. Daniel froze. "Where did you get that?" Thorne placed it carefully on the table. "Found by old mine. Smoke's still there." Daniel's hands shook. "That's my son's. He wore it the day he left." Thorne tilted his head. "Maybe he left it for you." Outside, the wind howled. Inside, Daniel felt something shift, not hope exactly, but a pulse of possibility. That night, Daniel couldn't stop staring at the buckle. The brass caught the firelight, throwing small flares of gold across the table. He turned it over and saw what he'd never noticed before. Tiny scratches along the back, letters carved crudely with a knife. "Still here." His heart stuttered. Thorne sat near the door, watching the fire like a man watches the sea. "He was near," he said quietly, "before the fire spread. Some left. Not all died." Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. "Others? Like you?" Thorne nodded. "Small ones. Some changed more. Some less. I searched. I learned to hide." Daniel gripped the buckle. "You think my son could be alive?" Thorne's gaze didn't waver. "Forest keeps what it can." The clock on the mantel ticked. Rain tapped the roof. For the first time in years, Daniel prayed, not the way he'd been taught, but like a craftsman shaping air into hope. When dawn came, he found Thorne outside, standing on the ridge, looking east. "We can find them," Daniel said. "You and me." Thorne turned, eyes bright against the morning light. "Then we go where fire began." Daniel nodded, pocketed the buckle, and slung his old satchel across his shoulder. "Let's start with the mine." Thorne smiled, or something close to it, and together they stepped into the trees. The fog was lifting now, the first sunlight catching the dew. Somewhere far away, a woodpecker tapped against a hollow trunk, keeping rhythm like a heartbeat. Have you ever gone looking for the past and found something waiting for you instead? That's what Daniel felt as he followed Thorne down the overgrown trail toward the old mining pit. The forest had changed since the last time he'd been there. Trees leaned like weary sentinels, their bark split by years of frost. The ground was pocked with sinkholes where rainwater had eaten through the old tunnels. Each step brought the smell of rust, smoke, and old sorrow. Thorne moved ahead with the confidence of someone who knew every root and rock by feel. He stopped once to touch a scarred birch trunk. "Fire came here," he said, voice almost reverent. Daniel nodded. 12 years ago. They said it was lightning. But I think he trailed off. He didn't have to finish. At the base of the hill, they found it. A collapsed entrance framed by twisted beams of blackened metal. Daniel's chest tightened. The air still smelled faintly of oil and ash. This is it, he murmured. Thorn crouched, brushing aside leaves until something glinted. He lifted a small object from the mud, a pocket knife, the kind given to boys on their first fishing trip. The handle was worn smooth, initials carved faintly. Daniel's breath hitched. That's his, he said, voice cracking. That's Matthew's knife. Thorn studied it, then handed it over carefully. He left a trail. Daniel's knees weakened. He'd spent years begging for a sign, any sign, that his son hadn't vanished into nothing. Now, here it was, cold, real, tangible. Thunder rumbled somewhere in the distance. Thorn looked toward the sky. Storm comes. We stay or go. Daniel clenched the knife. We go in. Thorn hesitated, eyes narrowing. Inside waits memory. Pain. Daniel nodded grimly. Then we face it. Together, they pushed aside debris and slipped into the mine. The air turned colder, denser. Daniel's flashlight beam flickered across walls scarred with soot. And then he saw it, painted on the stone in charcoal. Stay. His throat closed. He wrote that, Daniel whispered. He must have. Thorn touched the letters gently, claws trembling. He remembered your word. The tunnels twisted like veins, each corner breathing a faint echo of the storm above. Water dripped steadily, forming small rivers that snaked through the dust. Daniel's mind spun with memories, the lab's steel corridors, the screams in the night, his son's laughter before it all went wrong. He was just a boy, Daniel muttered, curious about everything. He'd follow a bird just to see where it slept. Thorn's deep voice rumbled in reply. Curious ones survive. They learn the forest. They found an old storage chamber half-collapsed under rubble. Rusted cages lay twisted, chains embedded in stone. Daniel's flashlight lingered on the largest one, bars melted from heat. That's where they kept you, he said quietly. Thorn stared, nostrils flaring. Yes, I sang when pain came. You answered. Daniel swallowed hard. I remember. Thunder cracked above, sending vibrations through the floor. Dust rained down. Daniel steadied himself against a beam. We should head back before the storm floods this place. But before they could move, a distant click echoed down the corridor, metallic, sharp. Then another. And another. Guns, Daniel whispered. Voices followed, rough, laughing, human. Tracks go this way. Big ones. Thorn's eyes flared amber in the dark. He crouched, muscles tightening. Hunters. Daniel's pulse spiked. They must have followed us. He remembered the bounty poster, $200 for proof. For some men, that was enough reason to kill. Thorn reached for Daniel's arm. You hide. Daniel shook his head. No. They'll shoot first, ask later. We need to show them you're not. Monster? Thorn finished, tone flat. Daniel hesitated, then met his gaze. You're not. Footsteps drew closer. Shadows moved like ink down the tunnel. Daniel raised the flute from his satchel and whispered, Let me try something. Daniel put the flute to his lips and began to play, slow, trembling notes that echoed like wind through hollow trees. It was the same melody he'd hummed that first night, the song that had drawn Thorn out of the fog. The hunters' voices faltered. What the hell is that? One muttered. Another laughed nervously. Probably him. The damn Ridgeback thing's Calendot. Daniel played louder, letting the notes twist through the tunnels, filling every crack and shadow. The sound was mournful but steady, like a heartbeat. Then Thorn joined in, a low hum, deep enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Together, the sound became something ancient and human all at once, a bridge between fear and understanding. But the hunters didn't understand. A flashlight beam swung toward them. There, by the cages. Gunfire split the air. Daniel ducked, heart pounding. Bullets sparked off stone. Thorn roared, not with rage, but warning, and moved faster than Daniel thought possible, disarming the first man with a sweep of his arm. The rifle clattered to the ground. Stop, Daniel shouted, voice cracking. Please stop. But the second hunter swung his gun toward Daniel. Thorn moved again, pushing Daniel aside, taking the hit across his shoulder. The creature staggered, growled, then caught the man by the collar and lifted him clear off the ground. Thorn, Daniel shouted. Don't. For a heartbeat. Everything froze. Rain pounding the roof. thunder echoing, blood trickling from Thorn's wound. Then Daniel whispered, voice raw, "Don't let us become like them." Thorn's eyes softened. Slowly, he set the man down. The hunters scrambled back, terrified. One of them, the older one, looked at Daniel, wide-eyed. "What the hell is that thing?" Daniel lowered the flute. "A friend." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then lightning struck outside, and the tunnel shook. The hunters dropped their gear and ran. Thorn leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. Daniel tore off his flannel shirt, pressing it to the wound. "You're okay. Just stay with me." Thorn smiled weakly. "Stay," he repeated. Always that word. By the time they reached the surface, the storm had turned savage. Rain hammered the trees, and the river below the ridge swelled, foaming white. Daniel half-dragged, half-guided Thorn back toward the cabin. The creature's wound bled through the makeshift bandage, but he never complained. "Almost there," Daniel said, shouting over the wind. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the forest in blinding flashes. For a moment, Daniel thought he saw movement. The hunters, perhaps, but when he turned, there was only the rain. They reached the cabin just as the roof began to leak. Daniel guided Thorn inside, stoked the fire, and poured boiling water over herbs from the shelf, old remedies his mother had sworn by. Thorn winced as Daniel pressed the poultice against his shoulder. "Hurts," he muttered. Daniel smirked faintly. "Means you're still alive." Thunder rolled again. Outside, the world blurred into a curtain of rain. Inside, time slowed. Daniel sat across from Thorn, the flute resting between them. "Why didn't you kill them?" Daniel asked quietly. Thorn looked up. "You said no." Daniel blinked. "You listened?" "Always." For a while, neither spoke. The fire crackled, the rain softened, and something inside Daniel began to ease. The years of guilt, the loneliness, the silence. "You know," Daniel said softly, "when my son was little, he used to whistle that same tune. The one I hummed that night. Maybe he taught it to you somehow." Thorn tilted his head. "Maybe we all learn the same songs. We just forget until someone hums again." Daniel smiled faintly, exhaustion in his bones. "Maybe so." Outside, the storm began to fade, but inside the cabin, another kind of weather was changing, the slow, quiet settling of peace after a lifetime of noise. Have you ever sat with someone who was more silence than speech, and somehow that silence healed you? That's what the night became. Two shapes by the fire, one man, one myth, breathing in the same rhythm as rain drummed on the roof. Daniel's arm throbbed from the struggle in the tunnels. He'd been grazed by a bullet. Not deep, but enough to make him dizzy. He waved it off at first, saying, "Had worse building porches." But Thorn saw through the lie. The creature's large hand rested gently over Daniel's shoulder. "You hurt," Thorn murmured. Daniel managed a tired smile. "We both are." Thorn studied him for a long time, then rose, rummaging through the corner where Daniel kept tools and scraps. He found a tin of pine salve and, mimicking Daniel's earlier care, applied it clumsily to the wound. The scent of sap and smoke filled the cabin. Daniel chuckled weakly. "You learn fast." Thorn shrugged, or something close to it. "You teach." Outside, the wind calmed, leaving the night strangely still. Daniel leaned back in his chair, eyes tracing the flicker of flame. "You know," he said softly, "I used to think redemption was for other people, the ones who made smaller mistakes." Thorn tilted his head. "Redemption means a chance to make peace, to fix what you broke." The creature looked toward the window, where rain streaked the glass like tears. "You fix much," he said. "Wood, house, songs. Now fix self." Daniel laughed, half a sob. "I'm trying." Thorn nodded once, satisfied. "Good. Try again tomorrow." But Daniel knew there might not be a tomorrow, not for him. The dizziness had deepened, his hands trembled. Still, he said nothing. He just listened as the storm moved east, leaving behind a silence that felt like grace. By dawn, the clouds had broken. Sunlight spilled through the mist, painting everything in gold. Daniel woke in his chair, a blanket draped over his shoulders. Thorn sat on the floor nearby, eyes closed, humming low. Daniel smiled faintly. Didn't think giants could hum. Thorn opened one eye. Didn't think men could listen. They shared a quiet laugh. Daniel tried to stand but staggered. The fever had set in during the night. Thorn caught him easily, lowering him back into the chair. "Rest." "I'm fine," Daniel muttered, but his body betrayed him. Sweat glistened at his temples, and his breath came shallow. He looked at Thorn, really looked, and felt no fear. Just a deep, aching affection. Thorn, he said quietly, if I don't make it through this, I need you to promise me something. Thorn leaned forward, eyes full of steady light. Speak. Don't hide forever. There's good out there. People who'll listen, if you teach them like you taught me. Thorn's brow furrowed. Humans hunt what they fear. Then make them see. Daniel coughed, the effort shaking him. You're not what they think. None of us are. Thorn reached out, taking Daniel's trembling hand. I see you. Not monster. Not coward. Daniel's vision blurred. He squeezed back weakly. That's enough. He gestured toward his workbench. My journal's in the drawer. Take it. Keep it safe. Maybe someday someone will read it and understand. Thorn nodded. I will. Daniel managed a faint grin. And the flute? That's yours now. The creature looked at the instrument, then back at Daniel. We made it together. Exactly, Daniel whispered. So don't forget the song. Outside, the birds began to sing, tentative after the storm. Inside, another kind of dawn unfolded, quiet, merciful, and final. The fever took Daniel before sunset. He died the way he lived, quietly, without complaint, eyes open to the ceiling as if following invisible music. His last words were simple, stay kind. Thorn didn't understand death the way humans did, but he felt it. The heartbeat that had echoed in sync with his own had gone still. For a long time, he sat motionless beside the chair, watching the fire fade to embers. Then, carefully, he lifted Daniel's body and carried it outside. The world smelled new, rain-washed, clean, forgiving. Under a great hemlock tree near the river, Thorn dug a grave with his own hands. He placed Daniel there gently, along with the journal, the flute, and a small carving of a boy holding a stick. When the last handful of earth fell, Thorn knelt and pressed his palm to the mound. Stay, he whispered, not as a command this time, but as a benediction. The forest responded, a rustle of leaves, a sigh of wind through the branches. Somewhere, deep in the woods, another voice hummed a single note. Thorn listened, then lifted the flute and played. The melody carried across the valley, Daniel's tune, but changed. Softer, fuller. A conversation between breath and memory. And when Thorn stopped, he heard something impossible, another flute answering from far away. He turned toward the echo. It came from the direction of the old mines. The sound was higher, lighter, like a boy's voice. Thorn closed his eyes. Matthew, he murmured. Then he rose, shoulders squared against the light. I will find them. Weeks passed. Hunters returned to the cabin after hearing rumors of a beast that killed a man. But what they found was not what they expected. The door hung open, the fire pit cold, and on the table sat a single carving. Daniel's face, smiling faintly, eyes carved with astonishing care. Beside it lay the bounty poster, folded neatly, and across it someone had etched a single word. Mercy. One hunter, the oldest, the one who had seen Thorn in the mine, removed his hat and whispered, he wasn't no monster. The others said nothing. They just stood there as wind swept through the cabin, lifting ash and sawdust into small spirals that caught the morning light. Outside, the forest had begun to reclaim the path. Ferns sprouted where footprints once lay. And from somewhere deep within the trees came a sound, faint, distant, but unmistakable. A flute. The melody rose and fell like breath, joined by another, lower tone. Together, they wove a song that was neither man's nor beast's, but both, a hymn of survival, forgiveness, and memory. In time, locals would tell stories about the carpenter and the ridgeback, how they built peace in a world that only wanted fear. Children would hum the tune near the river, never knowing where it came from, only that it made them feel safe. And if you ever walk those woods on a foggy morning, you might hear it too, a low hum carried on the wind, answering your breath with its own. They say it means you're not alone. Because in that forest, somewhere beyond the reach of roads and names, the song still plays. A promise between a man who believed too late and a creature who learned what forgiveness sounded like. And when the light hits the trees just right, you might even see them, a shadow and a shimmer, walking side by side, keeping rhythm with the earth itself. You know, stories like this aren't just about monsters. They're about us, the things we hide, the things we hurt, the things we hope to fix before the light fades. Daniel and Thorn never set out to save each other. They just listened, really listened, long enough to see the person inside the myth, the heart inside the silence. And maybe that's all redemption ever is. A moment when two broken things recognize the shape of mercy. Somewhere out there, in a world full of noise and anger, somebody's still humming their song, maybe without even knowing it. A melody of forgiveness, of trying again, of staying kind. If this story found you tonight, maybe it was meant to. Maybe it's your reminder that even when the fog closes in, there's still music waiting in the quiet, if you dare to listen. So if you felt something, if this story echoed somewhere deep, leave a light on. Share it. Let someone else hear the song too. Because stories like this don't end when the words stop. They keep breathing through the people who remember. And if you ever find yourself walking alone through your own dark forest, just remember Daniel's last words and whisper them to the wind. Stay kind.